So a while ago I was working on my portfolio and I wanted to add some cookies to it. So very simply I just went down to a local market where they have a great bakery, saw some cookies and brought them back to the studio that I wanted to kind of play with. If you look at my portfolio online, you'll see this cookie shot where there's a group of cookies stacked on top of a glass of milk and this really cool parchment just kind of working its way through the cookies. One of my most complimented shots in my book. It gets a lot of attention, probably because it's so simple and the eye naturally goes through the whole thing. So today we want to recreate something similar. I don't want to create the exact same shot, but I do want to shoot more cookies. Again, I'm going and I'm just buying store-bought cookies, not having them made, not working with a food stylist, just doing what's available to me. And I want to create a feel of that cookie shot, but have it look very different. That way both of these images could live in my portfolio in different places or even side by side, and then it's not going to feel as if I'm repeating myself, because I want to give whoever's looking at my portfolio, whether it's an art buyer, potential client, whoever it is, I want them to understand that I can shoot things in a variety of ways. I can take the same subject matter and give it a very different feeling. So I'm starting with my 5D Mark III. I've got my 100mm macro lens on here so I can get in fairly tight. It's going to give me the ability to kind of play with exactly how close or how far I want to pull back. I've also got my Lee filter system on here. This is something that I use all the time, and the reason is because of polarizers. I am a big fan of polarizers. These things help greatly just in terms of knocking down glare, knocking down reflection. If I want to pull something off of the surface, I can do so. Or if I want to pull something off of a bottle or a highlight that's really gross, I can do that with the polarizer. These are always on my camera for the most part. On a day like today, I might not need it at all. It's so cloudy, I'm really not getting any glare. And in fact, I don't want to push the ISO. I'm going to keep the matte box or the compendium hood on there because I want it just to shade the camera. That'll keep it from having any stray light coming in. Polarizer is going to go right there. So my Phobostand, as I told you, I live and die by this thing. I don't have it completely locked in place because I want a little bit of flexibility to play around with the milk and cookies. So what I decided to do was pull one of my backgrounds, just this kind of white, muddy-ish old surface. We are shooting tethered with our Tether Tools cable going into my laptop, and then I've got my ISO monitor. So I plugged my laptop into the monitor so I can see it a little bit bigger. On location, I'll just wind up using the monitor that is on the laptop that's built in, but in the studio it's nice to be able to have the big ISO to really take a look at and look at color rendition better. So that's kind of our basic setup. Shooting all tethered so we can get right to it, and we're shooting into Capture One. We've got the latest and greatest, the Capture One Pro 8, so that's out now and we're just starting with that. So let's get started. I want to go ahead and make some selections here, which I've already done in terms of my capture folder. I'm naming this milk and cookies shot. I've got all my metadata in there plugged in already because I want this stuff done. As I'm going through a whole series of images, I don't want to have to go back later and input all my metadata and all that kind of stuff. It's already done in the program. As I capture each one, it's going to come up and it's in it. So it's a good thing to go ahead and do. Plus, I love to label things so I know what they are as I'm going through. So first and foremost, I shoot almost everything to a specific crop. There are two crop sizes that I run when I'm doing any kind of portfolio stuff because my portfolio is 11x14 vertical, which means I'm either going to be shooting an 11x14 vertical shot or I'm going to be shooting a 14x22 horizontal shot. I always keep that in mind. I've got that plugged in. And the reason I do that is because 35mm sensors are going to show you something larger, longer than 11x14 crop. If I'm capturing all that information, I'm going to wind up wasting something when I go to crop it down to 11x14, or if I print it full frame, I'm going to have some dead space on the sides, which I really don't want. For me personally, my portfolio is all image, 11x14, full bleed, lots and lots of image. I don't want to waste any area. So as a result, I'm always shooting with an 11x14 crop if I'm going vertical rather, and I shoot with a 14x22 if I'm going horizontal. And I kind of think about these things beforehand. So first thing I want to do is just kind of figure this set out a little bit. That's my very first grab at it. It's definitely a little washed out, and it doesn't quite hold the interest for me that I want. So I'm going to make a couple of adjustments. Ooh, that's kind of cool. I'm getting some rings from the milk bottle, and I think I like that. I'm going to play off of that, see if I can't get that to show up a little bit, and maybe bring these guys back. Whoop. So one of the nice things here is we've got a really cloudy day, but there's still a good amount of light coming through this window. We just kind of brought the camera right next to it. There's so many clouds. It's just a giant softbox out there, really. I mean, the sun is so diffuse because it's going through all these clouds that it's just a really even source as it kind of pushes into the studio. On a day where it would be really sunny, I would either want to diffuse this because it would be coming in too much, or I would move my entire set into the interior of the studio because I want to get away from that really direct sun. So I'd bring it into the studio a little bit, which puts it into open shade. You may hear that term, open shade. I say that several times, and some people are not quite sure what that means. If you think about it in this terms, if you were in a park and you were under a pavilion, you're going to be in open shade in that pavilion where all the ambient light from outside is going to be pushing in there, but it's going to have a direction. It's going to come from the source. It's going to come from the same direction as the sun source, right? So you're still going to have direction, but you're not going to have these harsh shadows, which is not what you want in food. Food looks awful when you have harsh shadows. It's nice when it has this kind of just soft, real warm, real kind of ambient feel. So that is what we're going for without question. So we're going to make a couple of adjustments here and see what we get. And again, I'm using this Vanguard ball head, which I'm not quite familiar with, but that's fine. Because it never hurts to try new stuff out. So I've got my 100mm on here. It's a macro lens. And I'm totally blowing out. I want to bring some of this down a little bit. All right, so just taking a quick look, I'm pretty blown out here. Right now my camera settings, I'm at ISO 100, and the reason I've gone there is because I'm actually locked down and I've got a nice stable camera. The more I push the ISO in order to gain light and reduce my shutter speed, I'm going to wind up picking up noise. Now, I know I'm definitely old school because these cameras are great at 200, 400, even 800. You're not going to see any noise. I personally really like to shoot at 100 because that's where the cleanest files exist. So, since I've got the luxury of having a nice lockdown camera, I'm not doing this handheld, which, by the way, let me talk a little bit about handheld. Handheld photography and food photography is a bad idea, and here's why. As you're going through and you're fine-tuning things and moving things slightly, if you're handheld and you try to go back to that same position, you're never going to get right back to that same position. You're always going to be off a little bit. So lock that camera down. That allows you to fine-tune the details and really craft this image. Always do that. So here's the deal. Right now, I'm a little bit blown out. I'm at 1 second, which is a fairly long shutter speed, and my f-stop is at 5.6. That's pretty shallow. 5.6 is actually pretty shallow for a 100mm macro. I want a little bit more depth of field, and I absolutely need to stop down a little bit in terms of the amount of light coming through because this is blowing out. So I'm going to drop down to ½ second in my exposure, and I'm going to stop down to, let's say 7.1. Let's see how that looks. So let's go down to ½ second and grab one. Better. The exposure is starting to get right where I want it to be. Not in love with the composition yet. Don't see enough of the cookies. Kind of want to make this a little bit better. So I'm going to get in here and I'm going to kind of fine tune this. So one of the things I'm seeing as I look at this, I've got a lot of dead space here, which is just, I'm not loving. It does kind of give me that sense of environment. I'm seeing the wood. I'm seeing the nice old cooling rack, which is great, and that milk bottle. The milk bottle's in there a little too far. But I do see that little ring from the base of the milk, which I like. So again, I'm going to capitalize on that. Ooh, even better. Let's see if we can get a couple more of these. It's kind of cool. And let's move our cookies around, rather. Bring this guy forward. I very often will position myself with my head between the lens and my subject. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to look at what I'm doing from the camera's perspective. Now, I'm very careful in doing that. I don't want to jerk my head back. I don't want to smash into my lens. I definitely don't want to push that lens hood backwards at all. So I'm just getting in here and I'm kind of being nice and gentle, and I'm taking a good look at this cookie composition and how to make it better. Needs to feel a little bit looser, a little bit more organic, a little bit more natural. Already much better. I think I can bring this whole thing in a little bit. I might want to play with my crop and pull out a little bit. Let's see what I have. So again, you can see right now I've got space that I'm missing on both the top and the bottom because I'm cropping it out. If I were to shoot full frame like that, it's giving me extra space that just isn't going to fit into my 11x14 crop. So I'm putting that crop on intentionally because I want to see what that looks like and only work with that 11x14 because that's my hero final image. So immediately I'm seeing a couple things I want to do. I like what's going on down here. This is nice and soft. The cookie, however, the main part of the cookie is not quite tack sharp, so I've got to bring that in. And I want to get a little bit more interest going on in the background. I really like the shadow and kind of what's going on there. I'm going to create a couple more of those shadows. So first and foremost, let's tighten up the focus on the cookie and have it where it should be. I'm going to push this in ever so slightly. The other thing I often do is I position my hand on something that I'm going to move, and I bring my eye back to the viewfinder, and I look through the viewfinder as I'm moving it. Gives me the ability to fine-tune and see exactly what I want to do. All right, let's take a quick look at that, just for composition, and then we're going to work on some of the lighting. When I look at this, the eye is kind of moving fairly nicely through here, but it's not exactly where I want. I want to take this over to the edge a little bit more. Again, the viewer's eye is going to pull through the entire thing. It's going to move back around. I got to get some interest up here in order to push the viewer's eye back down, because now it's going up here and it's kind of getting lost. So if I can create some shadow, a little bit of shape up there, it's going to naturally push the viewer's eye back down into the scene where it's going to land on here. The other thing I want to do, I kind of like that little bit of crumb. I want to get some more of them. So I'm going to steal a little bit of my cookie from this side that I don't see, and I'm going to drop it in there. And I'm going to be very haphazard about it. I'm just going to kind of let it happen. Even got a raisin. Maybe too much. I can always pull it back. Just want to get a little of it going. All right, so let's do a couple things. Cards. I use black cards all the time. These are great in order to cast a little bit of shadow. Card and a clamp. That's all I need. And in doing something like this, I can create a little bit of pooling of light, or pooling of shadow rather, in the background. Okay, that is already in. And I know I need a bigger card, so I'm going to switch to something larger. It's a little black card. You just stick a little pony clamp on it and bring it in there, and it's going to help me cut down the light and give a little definition. It's just that little bit of white that's kind of filling in up there. Now we brought a little bit of tone, and it's already starting to bring the eye, as your eye comes up into this milk, it's starting to push it back, coming down back into the cookies, which is good. So I'm just going to add another card in order to help increase that.